In today's day and age, the quality of in-ring wrestling has reached a level where just being good no longer cuts it. You have to be fantastic. It says a lot then about Seth Rollins that even with some of the greatest performers of all time around him, he still manages to stand out as one of the very best the industry has to offer. Rollins was always a great in-ring performer. However, over the last decade, he's become even more than that. He's become a great champion, someone who can carry a company if called upon to do so, and he's only just getting started. So, how did he get to this point in his career? Well, join us today as we take a deep dive into his entire career journey so far in Burn It Down, the Seth Rollins Story. Colby Lopez was born in Buffalo, Iowa on May 28, 1986. While the young Colby had a wide range of interests as a child, he made sure to stay laser-focused on his number one passion in life, professional wrestling. After graduating high school in 2004, he began training at Danny Daniels Wrestling School in Chicago, Illinois. Here, he would learn the basics, enough to prepare him for his in-ring debut a year later in the Iowa independent scene, where he performed as Gix. When he got booked with Ian Rotten's Independent Wrestling Association Mid-South, he came up with the name Tyler Black, something that would stick with him for the rest of his time on the Indies. This time on the Indies saw Black build a reputation as one of the most exciting young prospects out there. It wasn't long before he would capture his first title, winning the NWA Midwest Tag Team belts with Merrick Brave. He even got his first brief taste of the big stage when he made a few appearances for TNA in October of 2006, teaming with Jeff Luxon to take on LAX. It wouldn't be on Impact that his first major break would come, though. That happened on Ring of Honor. A mecca of indie wrestling in North America, ROH has long been considered a place that every unsigned performer wants to go to make a name for themselves. It's seen a who's who of current wrestling stars pass through its doors, including Daniel Bryan, AJ Styles, and Kenny Omega. Tyler Black would of course go on to become one of those names himself, but for the time being, he was still new blood to the ROH audience, making his debut in September 2007 at their Man Up pay-per-view alongside Jimmy Jacobs and Necro Butcher, and forming a stable with them called the Age of the Fall. The first victims of the group were the Briscoe brothers, who Black & Company attacked that night. They even went as far as to hang Jay Briscoe from the light rigging. Of course, it goes without saying that this proved to be highly controversial, and the company had to remove the footage from TV broadcasts after the live crowd reacted so badly to it. Thankfully, there was no blowback for the newcomer, and at that December's final battle, he and Jacobs were able to beat the Briscoes for the ROH World Tag Team Championships. Despite losing those belts by January 2008, the two would find success elsewhere, becoming tag champions in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, while Black went to Full Impact Pro and won their heavyweight belt. He was still a player in Ring of Honor, too, having an impressive outing against Nigel McGuinness at Take No Prisoners on March 16th, his first main event for the company and first shot at the world title there. He came out on the losing end that night, but he would get a second shot at the gold at Death Before Dishonor 6 on August 2, 2008, this time as part of a fatal four-way involving McGuinness, Bryan Danielson, and Claudio Castagnoli, where the champion was once again able to retain. Still, champion or not, Tyler Black was by now one of the most popular stars in the company, putting on excellent performances every time he entered the ring. He garnered even further fan support when his partner Jimmy Jacobs turned on him after he lost a match to Austin Aries in December 2008. This sparked a feud that would carry on for the next 6 months, the two finally settling their beef at June 26, 2009's Violent Tendencies in a steel cage match where Black came out victorious. As a result of this, and him having taken Nigel McGuinness to a time-limit draw earlier that year in a non-title match, the Iowa native was once again positioned in the world title picture. Before he could get that shot, though, he would have to take some time off to undergo neck surgery. He returned to the ring on October 10, 2009, where he won the Survival of the Fittest tournament to formally become the #1 contender to the ROH World title after beating Claudio Castagnoli, Colt Cabana, Delirious, Chris Hero, and Roderick Strong in a 6-way elimination match. His shot came a month later at the company's first ever live pay-per-view, Final Battle 2009, where he took the champion Austin Aries to a 60-minute time-limit draw in an instant classic, the success of which necessitated the company's booker Jim Cornette setting the rematch for Ring of Honor's 8th anniversary show on February 13, 2010. Here, a judges panel were placed at ringside made up of Kenny King, Roderick Strong, and Cornette himself to ensure that even in the event of another time-limit draw, this time a winner could be determined. And there was a winner that night. After 22 minutes and 24 seconds of some of the best wrestling on the planet, Black was finally able to get the victory and the ROH World title, solidifying himself as one of the top guys on the indie scene. Throughout most of 2010, he continued to prove why he had been given that accolade, defending the belt against Austin Aries and Roderick Strong in a three-way elimination match at April 3rd's Big Bang pay-per-view, as well as against Davey Richards at the June 19th Death Before Dishonor 8. In August, while he was still the champ, news broke online that Black had signed a deal with WWE and would soon be leaving the Indies to report to Florida Championship Wrestling. This led to the hardcore fan base rejecting him and triggered a heel turn for the soon-to-be FCW star. In his own take on the Summer of Punk angle from years before, Black threatened to leave ROH with the belt, even going as far as to refuse to put it on the line during his matches. Of course, there was no way the company was going to let him go without dropping it, and this eventually happened when he lost a no DQ match to Roderick Strong at Glory by Honor 9 on September 11th, his reign lasting 210 days by the end. After that match, Tyler Black said his goodbyes to ROH and the rest of the Indies, showing up at FCW for the first time on September 30th, 2010. Once there, he was renamed Seth Rollins, a name chosen as a nod to Black Flag singer Henry Rollins, who Black was a big fan of. Despite losing his debut match against Michael McGillicuddy, he was quickly able to establish himself for this new fanbase by having excellent matches against the likes of Hunico, Damian Sandow, and later, his future Shield teammate Dean Ambrose. Now, it should be said that by the time Rollins started feuding with Ambrose, he was already a former FCW Florida Tag Team Champion and the FCW Jack Briscoe 15 Champion. However, it was this program that took him to the next level and opened up the eyes of many members of management in Stamford. The two men had a series of 3 short Iron Man matches here which tore the house down each time, ending with Seth winning the third deciding bout and the respect of higher-ups as a result. His reward for this was beating Leo Kruger to become the FCW Florida Heavyweight Champion on February 23, 2012. And when FCW was folded into the revamped NXT in August of that year, Seth went with them. Of course, everyone knows the Yellow and Gold brand as it is today, one of the hottest promotions on the planet, and probably the best thing under the WWE umbrella. For all the world-class talent that's come through its doors over the years, though, only one man can say that he was the first ever NXT champion, and that is Seth Rollins, who won the belt after beating Jinder Mahal at the August 29th episode of their weekly show. You would think that with all this success, it would be a given that he would be a superstar when he moved to the main roster, but that wasn't the case. In fact, it wasn't always a certainty that he would make it to the main roster at all. Sure, he was one of the best wrestlers in the world, but this was during an era where the word indie had a certain stigma to it, and was liable to do more to turn off Vince McMahon than anything else. Thankfully, the likes of CM Punk and Daniel Bryan were starting to change that notion on the main roster, however, and Seth finally got his call up when, alongside Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns, he attacked Ryback at the 2012 Survivor Series, beginning the reign of The Shield. The Shield, though relatively short-lived, have already managed to attain legendary status in WWE. They absolutely dominated the company during 2013 and part of 2014, labeling themselves the Hounds of Justice and regularly appearing out of the crowd to fight against any corruption or unfairness that they saw. While Dean Ambrose was portrayed as the wildcard lunatic fringe of the group and Roman Reigns the badass heavy, Rollins became known as the Architect, taking kayfabe credit for forming the stable and at times acting as their de facto leader. The Shield as a whole is something we've gone into great detail in over on our Dean Ambrose video, so we won't do the full deep dive again here, but let's cover some of the highlights. Their debut match at December 2012's Tables, Ladders, and Chairs gave fans their first glimpse at what they could expect from the trio, an absolutely unbeatable unit who put down the team of Daniel Bryan, Kane, and Ryback with ease. They followed this up by beating absolutely everybody. In an example of pitch-perfect booking, the company created 3 superstars in the space of a year as they bested the likes of John Cena, Randy Orton, and The Undertaker in 6-man matches. They didn't suffer their first loss until the May 13th episode of Raw, and even after that, they still continued to win more often than not. At the time, many fans saw Ambrose as the breakout star of the group, while privately, management were already grooming Roman Reigns to be the top guy. It would have been so easy then for Rollins to get lost in the shuffle and end up becoming the Marty Jannetty. Luckily, he was far too talented for this, proving to be a highlight reel in many of the trio's matches and making it clear that he was the best in-ring performer of the three. As a duo, Seth and Roman would win the tag team titles on May 19, 2013, giving each man their first title win on the main roster. They wouldn't lose these until the following October, and that would be in one of the best matches of the year against the Rhodes brothers. Perhaps their in-ring highlight as a trio came on the February 23, 2014 Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, where they had a legitimate dream match against the Wyatt family in front of a raucous crowd who were so pumped up that night they were already chanting "This is awesome" before the bell even rang. But as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end, and that end came on the June 2, 2014 episode of Raw where, to the heartbreak of many in attendance, Seth turned on his Shield brothers and joined the Authority, severing the group and starting a bitter blood feud between himself and Ambrose in the process. It was a moment many weren't ready for. In fact, the three Shield members had fought hard backstage to keep the band together, feeling that there was more that could be done with them as a unit. Management felt otherwise, though, and decided to go ahead with the breakup. The choice to have Rollins turn heel was considered interesting to many who felt it would either be Ambrose or Reigns who would get the honor. It was evidence to some that Seth wasn't going to fall through the cracks, as now with the force of the Authority behind him, he was about to be rocketed into the main event singles scene. And this was an opportunity he didn't waste. He won the Money in the Bank contract on June 29th, earning him a title shot at a time and place of his choosing over the next year. Then he had a series of great matches with Dean Ambrose, climaxing in a Hell in a Cell bout at that year's titular pay-per-view, which saw the two-men main event over John Cena and Randy Orton. He also picked up two lackeys in the form of Jamie Noble and Joey Mercury's J&J Security, who basically served as his modern-day equivalent of the Stooges. Rest in peace, Pat Patterson. Next, Seth took part in arguably the best triple threat match in WWE history at the 2015 Royal Rumble against Cena and Brock Lesnar, a bout that was so good that it almost made up for the catastrophic Rumble match later that night. By WrestleMania 33, Rollins was being talked about as the best performer in the company. He faced Randy Orton in a losing effort early on in the night after falling to probably the best RKO ever, but this only set him up to interject himself into the main event between Lesnar and Roman Reigns later on after he cashed in his Money in the Bank contract and turned it into a triple threat midway through the match. A curb stomp to Reigns later and the Architect was the WWE Champion, becoming not only the first member of the Shield to do so, but the first NXT alumni to do so too. This would become known as the Heist of the Century, and was one of the best endings to a WrestleMania in recent memory. He followed this victory up by holding on to the belt for the next 8 months, fending off challenges from Dean Ambrose, Randy Orton, and most memorably John Cena. In fact, it was at SummerSlam 2015 where Rollins beat Cena to become both the WWE Champion and the United States Champion at the same time, the first and only man to date to ever do so. He was now a made man and arguably the top guy in the company given the difficulty that Roman Reigns was having in getting over with fans. Unfortunately, this would come to a crashing end when he tore his ACL during a house show match in Dublin, forcing him to vacate the belt and undergo surgery that put him on the shelf for the next 6 months. Similar to Triple H in 2002, Seth's time away made fans' hearts grow fonder for him, and by the time he was set to return in May 2016, many expected the company to capitalize on this and push him as a mega babyface. This, however, was still at the point when Vince McMahon was all in on Roman Reigns, so when the Architect did return, it was to attack his former Shield teammate, remaining heel in what many at the time considered to be a huge missed opportunity. Regardless of his alignment, however, nothing would stop Rollins from beating Reigns for the WWE title the following month at Money in the Bank. Of course, he immediately lost this again to Dean Ambrose, but it wasn't the end of the world. He would be the #1 overall pick in the company's 2016 draft, moving over to Raw, where he would challenge Finn Balor to become the inaugural Universal Champion at that year's SummerSlam on August 21st, a match he would ultimately lose. When Balor was forced to vacate the title the next day due to injury, it seemed like Seth would be the clear choice to pick up the ball, and he almost did. That was until he was screwed over by his mentor Triple H, finally turning him babyface as he entered into a WrestleMania 33 program with the Game. On the night of the big match, Rollins beat Triple H clean in the middle of the ring, adding another major feather to his cap as well as a new moniker in the Kingslayer. Once that was in his rearview mirror, he handed Samoa Joe his first loss on the main roster, then reunited with his former Shield brother Dean Ambrose. This was the true redemption of Rollins as a babyface character, as he was forced to earn the forgiveness of the man he had betrayed. It didn't happen overnight, though. Over a series of weeks in the summer of 2017, Seth had to rebuild his relationship with Dean, eventually convincing him that he had changed his ways as the two went on to win the Raw Tag Team titles from Cesaro and Sheamus at that year's SummerSlam. Now a unit once again, Rollins and Ambrose set about reuniting with the third piece of the Shield, coming to Roman Reigns' aid during his beef with the Miztourage at the start of the autumn. Their first match together again was supposed to take place at the October 22nd Tables, Ladders, and Chairs pay-per-view. However, Reigns was pulled from the match after contracting the mumps, beginning a recurring theme of Shield reunions being cursed from the get-go. In fact, not long after Reigns was cleared to return to the ring, Ambrose suffered a torn bicep, putting him out of action for 9 months and ending the revival for the time being. Rollins would move on to a program with Jason Jordan, with the two briefly becoming tag team champions in what was clearly being set up for an eventual blow-up and WrestleMania singles match between them. Once again, though, plans changed when Jordan had to retire from in-ring competition after being struck down with a serious neck injury. While this now made Seth a man without a program leading up to the biggest show of the year, a potential catastrophe, he would manage to catch fire with crowds after lasting for an hour and 5 minutes during a 7-man gauntlet match on the February 19, 2018 episode of Raw. This performance sparked a renewed wave of fan support for the former WWE champion, and he rode that wave for the next year, winning the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 34 and putting on a series of great matches throughout the spring and summer. When Dean Ambrose returned from injury on the October 22, 2018 edition of Raw, he initially aligned himself with Rollins, only to turn on him in a truly tasteless angle which played off Roman Reigns' real-life leukemia diagnosis and was instrumental in Ambrose eventually leaving the company altogether. Still, the Architect's in-ring work was nothing less than stellar, and in 2019, he would be placed number 1 in the PWI Top 500 Wrestlers of that year. This was followed up with him winning the Royal Rumble that January, and going on to slay the Beast at WrestleMania 35 when he pinned Brock Lesnar in just 2 minutes and 30 seconds, becoming the Universal Champion for the first time as a result. After that, WWE began acknowledging his real-life relationship with Becky Lynch, with the two forming a tag team to successfully take on Baron Corbin and Lacey Evans at the July 14, 2019 Extreme Rules pay-per-view. He also beat Lesnar for a second time at that year's SummerSlam, further proving that he was the top babyface on the brand. Seth would reign throughout the summer as Universal Champion and go on to defend his title against Bray Wyatt later that year, in one of the most controversial Hell in a Cell matches of all time. However, Seth's reign would end later that same month as he would be defeated by The Fiend in a rematch at that year's Crown Jewel pay-per-view. Shortly after the loss, Seth would turn heel, dubbing himself the Monday Night Messiah and taking on a character who believed himself to be the savior of the company. The most notable disciple he would pick up during this time would be Buddy Murphy, with the two going on to win Tag Team Gold together on January 20th, 2020. The union would continue throughout Rollins' ridiculous but entertaining feud with Rey Mysterio later in the year, a program most memorable for the infamous Eye for an Eye match at July 19th's horror show at Extreme Rules, and for the in-ring debut of Dominic Mysterio at the following month's SummerSlam. The Rey feud would also spell the end of Rollins and Murphy's partnership. This was after Murphy started an on-screen relationship with Mysterio's daughter, Aaliyah. Now joining forces with his new family, Murphy had a blow-off match with the Wrestling Messiah on the November 20th episode of SmackDown. The reason, of course, for the quick end to this program was that Seth was going on paternity leave, given that his fiancée, Becky Lynch, has recently given birth to their baby daughter, Rue. Providing all goes as planned, he'll probably be back early next year, just in time for WrestleMania season. And though we don't know what he'll be doing yet, it'll likely be a highlight of that card if history is anything to go by. Either way, Seth Rollins doesn't need to prove himself anymore. At only 34, he's already one of the best wrestlers of his generation, breathing that same rarefied air as the likes of AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan. Even if he stopped to become a full-time father today, he would be a first-ballot Hall of Famer for sure. Selfishly though, we hope he's got many more years in him, because we love watching him in the ring too much to let him go just yet. Well guys, what did you think of the video? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, as well as follow Wrestle with Andy on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.